I was shaking so hard my hands left faint fingerprints on the wooden courtroom table. My throat burned, and the sound of my mother's voice, steady, polished, and cold, echoed through the sterile air like a verdict I hadn't earned. "My daughter can barely hold a job," she said. "She's irresponsible, unstable, and unfit to raise a child." Patricia Turner, my mother, the woman who used to braid my hair before school, was testifying against me in a custody hearing for my 3-year-old daughter. Lily, it's strange how betrayal doesn't make noise when it happens. It just quietly rearranges everything inside you. I sat there watching her hands folded neatly in her lap, her face composed like she was reading from a script she'd been practicing her whole life. My attorney, an overworked public defender named Sarah Chen, kept her eyes down, scribbling notes. The judge stared at me the way people stare at an accident they can't look away from. That's the moment my story really began. But to understand how I got there, you need to know what came before. Quick reminder, most of you aren't subscribed. If you enjoy this, hit subscribe and like now, then let's get back to the story. 2 years earlier, I was 29 and still believed life could be fair. My name's Allison Turner, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I was an associate attorney at a small but respectable firm called Morgan & Pierce. I wasn't getting rich, but I was proud. I handled family law, divorces, custody disputes, estate planning. I liked helping people find peace after chaos. I thought that meant I understood heartbreak. I didn't. Then I met Derek Castellano. Charming, confident, expensive shoes, easy smile. He ran an import-export business, which I later realized meant he had money without ever explaining where it came from. 8 months later, he proposed at a restaurant I couldn't afford to breathe in. I said yes because I was in love, or at least believed that's what love felt like. We got married. 6 months later, I was pregnant. Derek seemed thrilled, posting ultrasound photos on social media, bragging about fatherhood before the baby even had fingernails. When Lily was born, she came screaming into the world like she already knew life wasn't going to be easy. She had his chin and my eyes, and I thought that meant we'd always be connected. But by the time Lily was 3 months old, Derek was barely home. His phone never left his pocket. When I finally looked, I found months of messages with his executive assistant, a woman named Jade. The words were graphic, constant, merciless. They'd been sleeping together since before Lily was born. I filed for divorce that week. Derek's family had money and influence. I had student loans and postpartum depression. He hired the most expensive family law attorney in Oregon, a man named Franklin Howard, who treated every courtroom like it was Broadway. I represented myself because I couldn't afford anyone else. I told myself I could handle it. I was a lawyer, after all. But the system doesn't care about titles. It cares about appearances, and I looked broken. The divorce drained me financially and emotionally. I lost my house, most of my savings, and eventually my job. Morgan & Pierce said my performance had declined. They called it termination. I called it rock bottom. For a while, I worked at Riverside Cafe, pouring lattes for people who probably drove past me when I still had a parking spot downtown. $12 an hour and aching feet. My mother, Patricia, would call occasionally, not to check on me, but to remind me that I'd made my bed. She'd always been like that, perfectionist, judgmental, the kind of woman who thought empathy was weakness. When I was a kid, she'd correct my posture at the dinner table until I cried. 6 months into that gray stretch of my life, Derek was killed instantly when a drunk driver blew through a red light on I-5. The news didn't feel real. I expected grief, but all I felt was emptiness. Still, I thought at least one thing was certain now. Custody of Lily would revert to me automatically. I spent 2 weeks painting her new room, bought a toddler bed from Goodwill, and started to believe life might finally be giving me a second chance. Then my mother showed up. She stood in my doorway in tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater, looking around my apartment like it was contagious. "Allison," she said without a hello, "we need to discuss Lily's future." "Her future is with me, Mom. I'm her mother." "Are you?" she asked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're 31, working part-time at a coffee shop, living in a studio apartment. How do you plan to raise a child in this?" "I'm getting back on my feet," I told her. "That's exactly why Lily needs stability." She took a step closer, lowering her voice as if she were breaking bad news kindly. "I've spoken to Franklin Howard. He agrees that, under the circumstances, I should petition for custody. For Lily's sake, I actually laughed. You're not serious." I'm entirely serious, she said, already turning toward the door. I'm her grandmother. I have a home, income, and no history of instability. You're my mother, I whispered. How can you do this? She didn't answer. She just said, because someone has to protect that child from your failures. Then she left. That's how I ended up sitting in that courtroom 3 months later, watching her testify that I wasn't fit to raise my own daughter. Howard, the same slick attorney who'd helped Derek destroy me, was now standing beside her, smiling like this was some kind of game he'd already won. He asked her about my employment history. She recited every job I'd lost or quit since the divorce, carefully omitting the reasons. So it would be fair to say, Howard said, that your daughter can barely hold a job. I'm afraid that's accurate, she said. The words hung in the air like smoke. My throat closed. Across the room, Sarah, my public defender, didn't object. She couldn't. Every word my mother spoke was technically true. Howard brought up an incident where I'd been late picking up Lily from preschool because my car broke down and my phone died. He made it sound like I'd abandoned her. My mother nodded solemnly as if remembering a tragedy. Then came my medical records, antidepressants after Lily's birth, framed as proof of instability. My former cafe manager testified that I'd been tired and distracted sometimes. Howard turned it all into a portrait of incompetence. When it was my turn to testify, I swore to tell the truth, though I already knew truth didn't matter here. Perception did. Howard smiled that reptilian smile. Miss Turner, why were you fired from Morgan and Pierce? I was dealing with postpartum depression, I said quietly. I made a couple of mistakes. Mistakes, he repeated like the word was dirty. 2 missed filing deadlines in the legal profession. Deadlines are critical, aren't they? Yes. And yet you missed them because you couldn't handle the pressure. I wanted to scream that I'd been holding everything together by a thread, that my husband was cheating on me, that I'd been pumping breast milk in a janitor's closet between depositions, but none of that mattered. He wasn't asking for truth. He was building a story. He asked how much I earned at the cafe. $12 an hour. 25 to 30 hours a week. He made a show of calculating the total out loud. So roughly $300 before taxes. Is that sufficient to support yourself and a child? It's tight, but I manage. In a studio apartment, he said, turning to the judge. 400 square feet, correct? Where would your daughter sleep? I have a toddler bed set up in the corner. In the corner, he repeated, shaking his head. While Mrs. Turner owns a 3-bedroom home with a yard. It was brutal, deliberate, humiliating. I could feel the judge's perception of me collapsing with every word. When Howard finally sat down, I stepped off the witness stand on unsteady legs. The judge called for a 15-minute recess. I walked into the hallway and leaned against the wall, trying to breathe. Sarah joined me, her expression gentle but grim. I'm sorry, Allison. She's going to win. My own mother, I said, my voice shaking. She's actually going to take my daughter. Sarah didn't answer right away. The evidence is on her side. Judges care about stability more than anything else, and on paper. She looks like the stable one. I nodded numbly. My reflection in the courthouse window looked like a ghost, someone halfway erased. Somewhere out there, people were getting lunch, laughing, living normal lives. I had never felt more alone. When the recess ended, I went back into the courtroom, ready to lose everything. The judge picked up his pen. I'll review the evidence and issue a ruling within. The doors opened. A man in a navy suit walked in like he owned the place. Mid-50s, silver hair, sharp eyes. Your Honor, my apologies for the delay, he said calmly. May I approach? And you are? The judge asked. Marcus Kane, the man replied. I've been retained to represent Miss Allison Turner. I froze. I had never seen this man in my life. I couldn't afford him. I couldn't afford anyone. But something in his voice, the certainty, the calm, made the whole room shift. Howard looked irritated. My mother's expression flickered for the first time that day, and as Marcus handed the judge his paperwork and turned toward the witness stand, I realized something inside me I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The entire courtroom seemed to freeze when Marcus Kane walked in. Calm, collected, like a man who had already read the final page of a book no one else knew the ending to. He handed a folder to the bailiff, nodded at the judge, and turned toward me. Miss Turner, he said quietly, you don't know me yet, but I promise you're in good hands. I wanted to ask who he was, why he was here, how he even knew my name. But before I could speak, Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Mr. Kane, we're well into proceedings. What exactly do you intend to contribute at this stage? Marcus smiled slightly. The truth, Your Honor. Howard looked annoyed. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We're minutes away from a ruling. Then a few more minutes won't hurt, Marcus said evenly. I have critical evidence that directly impacts the petitioner's credibility. The judge hesitated, studying him. Very well. You may proceed, Marcus nodded. I'd like to recall Mrs. Patricia Turner to the stand. My mother looked startled. For the first time that day, her perfect posture faltered. She exchanged a quick glance with Howard, who whispered something that made her jaw tighten. Still, she rose and took the stand again, her heels clicking like a metronome of dread. Marcus approached slowly, each step deliberate. Mrs. Turner, he began, you've testified that your daughter Allison is unstable and unable to provide a consistent environment for her child. Correct? Yes, she said, forcing a calm tone. And you believe you can provide that consistency? Of course. Marcus opened a folder and removed a sheet of paper. How often do you see your granddaughter, Lily? Patricia frowned. I try to see her every week. You try? Marcus echoed. Can you be more specific? I visit when I can. Maybe once or twice a month. Marcus handed a document to the bailiff. Your Honor, this is a verified visitation log from Little Sprouts Preschool. It shows that Mrs. Turner picked up her granddaughter 4 times in the past 6 months. The judge raised an eyebrow. 4 times? Patricia's lips tightened. I have my own responsibilities. Quick reminder, most of you aren't subscribed. If you enjoy this, hit subscribe and like now, then let's get back to the story. Of course, Marcus said smoothly. But less than once per month. That's quite different from every week. Wouldn't you agree? Howard stood. Objection. Relevance? Goes directly to the petitioner's claim of being a consistent caregiver, Marcus replied. Overruled, said the judge. Marcus continued, voice cool and sharp. Now, Mrs. Turner, during these 18 months when your daughter has been struggling financially, did you ever offer her assistance with rent, groceries, or childcare? I wanted her to learn independence, she said. Independence, Marcus repeated softly. Or failure? Howard shot up again. Objection. Sustained, the judge said, but the damage was done. Patricia's expression wavered. Marcus walked closer. When Allison lost her position at Morgan & Pierce, did she tell you why? She said she made mistakes. That she was overwhelmed. Did you ask what caused it? Did you try to help her? I'm her mother. Not her therapist, Patricia snapped. Maybe not, Marcus said, his voice steady. But you seem very comfortable diagnosing her from the witness box. A few quiet chuckles rippled through the courtroom. My mother flushed red. Marcus turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to submit further documentation regarding Miss Turner's recent activities. My pulse quickened. What activities? I'd been working double shifts, studying late at night, but I hadn't told anyone about that. He held up a second file. Mrs. Turner, are you aware that your daughter has been taking online legal courses through Georgetown University? My mother blinked. No. Did you know she completed 24 credit hours in family law, graduating with highest honors? She shook her head. No, I didn't. Did you know she recently passed the Washington State Bar exam, scoring in the top 5%? The room erupted in murmurs. My hands trembled. That result had come out 5 days ago. I hadn't told anyone. She never told me, Patricia whispered. Perhaps because you never asked, Marcus said quietly. But there's more. He produced an envelope and handed it to the judge. 3 days ago, Miss Turner received an official job offer from the King County Prosecutor's Office in Seattle. Starting salary, $75,000 per year, full benefits, beginning in 2 weeks. My breath caught. I had read that email 12 times, afraid to believe it was real. Judge Morrison leaned back. Is that true, Miss Turner? I nodded weakly. Yes, Your Honor, Marcus smiled faintly. Your Honor, this woman isn't unstable. She's resilient. She lost her career, her marriage, nearly her child, and still rebuilt everything from the ground up. Howard stood again, clearly rattled. Your Honor, this is irrelevant to her past conduct. She was still fired, Yes, Marcus interrupted, because she refused to help her firm cover up fraud. The entire courtroom fell silent. Marcus opened another folder. 14 months ago, Miss Turner discovered that one of Morgan and Pierce's top clients was committing large-scale real estate fraud. She reported it internally. 2 weeks later, she was fired for poor performance. He handed a packet of emails to the judge. Here's the written complaint she filed with the Oregon State Bar. The investigation found merit. Morgan and Pierce is currently under review. The judge looked stunned. That's significant, Howard sputtered. Your Honor, none of this— Sit down, Mr. Howard, the judge said firmly. Marcus turned back to my mother. Mrs. Turner, does that sound like an irresponsible woman to you? Someone who sacrifices her career to do what's right? Patricia said nothing. Marcus's tone softened, but his words cut deeper. Did you know any of this before today? No, she whispered. Why not? I didn't ask. You didn't ask, he repeated. Because it was easier to believe the story you'd already written, the one where your daughter was broken and you were the savior. Patricia looked down at her hands. Her composure cracking, Marcus stepped closer. Mrs. Turner, when you filed this petition, was your motivation truly Lily's well-being, or was it something else? Her silence said everything. Marcus turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have one more witness. The courtroom doors opened again, and a woman in her 50s walked in wearing a black suit and quiet confidence. Marcus smiled. Your Honor, this is Magistrate Eleanor Hartley, King County Family Court. The judge blinked. A sitting magistrate? Yes, she's here to testify on behalf of Miss Turner. Eleanor took the stand, swore in, and looked at me with a small, reassuring smile. Magistrate Hartley, Marcus said. Can you tell the court how you know Miss Turner? She's been working under my supervision as a judicial extern for the past 3 months, Eleanor said. She's one of the most dedicated, capable attorneys I've ever trained. The judge leaned forward. Is that so? Yes, Your Honor. In fact, as of 2 weeks ago, the Washington Judicial Selection Committee confirmed Miss Turner as the newest family court judge in King County. The air left the room. Even I forgot to breathe. My mother stood abruptly. That's not possible. She's been working at a cafe. Eleanor remained calm. She continued working part-time while her appointment was finalized. Prudence, not instability, Patricia's voice broke. You're lying. She can't be, she's— Enough! Judge Morrison banged his gavel. Mrs. Turner, sit down, Marcus's voice softened. Your Honor, Allison Turner isn't unfit. She's proof that strength doesn't always look perfect. She's overcome betrayal, poverty, depression, and still risen to a position of service to others. That's not instability, that's integrity. He paused, then lifted one last document. And one more thing, Your Honor. Financial records of the petitioner. My mother froze. Marcus continued. Mrs. Turner currently has over $40,000 in gambling debt, a second mortgage on her home, and foreclosure proceedings pending within 90 days. Howard's face drained of color. That can't be public record, Marcus said simply. Filed with the county clerk last month. Gasps filled the courtroom. Patricia buried her face in her hands. I just needed the trust fund money, she whispered. For Lily's care. Marcus's tone was gentle but merciless. Or for your debts? She didn't answer. The silence was unbearable. I wanted to hate her, but all I felt was exhaustion. Judge Morrison sighed heavily. I believe we've heard enough. Mr. Howard, do you wish to continue? Howard turned to my mother, whispered something, then straightened. Your Honor, I withdraw as counsel. He packed his briefcase and walked out. My mother looked at me, her face pale and streaked with mascara. I can't believe this, she said quietly. You're a judge? You never asked, I said. The judge's gavel came down sharply. Petition withdrawn. Full custody awarded to Miss Turner. Supervised visitation to Mrs. Turner pending counseling. Court adjourned. The sound echoed like thunder. It was over. But as everyone began to leave, Marcus Caney turned to me and said something that would stay with me forever. Miss Turner, he said, sometimes justice shows up late, but it always shows up. And for the first time in 2 years, I actually believed him. Seattle looked different from my new office window. The city glimmered under a pale morning sun, ferries slicing white lines across Elliott Bay. I could see the Space Needle rising beyond the rooftops and, in the distance, Mount Rainier like a silent guardian. My office was small but spotless, a fresh start with my name etched on the door, Judge Allison Turner. Every time I saw that nameplate, my heart still stuttered in disbelief. Lily sat cross-legged on the carpet behind my desk, humming softly while coloring a picture of the two of us, stick figures with big smiles and a bright yellow sun overhead. We had moved to Seattle 2 weeks ago, just the two of us, into a small apartment with a backyard and a patch of wildflowers she insisted on calling our garden. It wasn't much, but it was ours. All ours. A knock on the door pulled me back to the present. Eleanor Hartley, my mentor, stepped in wearing her signature gray suit and warm, knowing smile. "Ready for your first day on the bench?" My stomach turned. Ready might be a stretch. Terrified feels more accurate. "Good," she said. "That means you care? What's your first case?" I glanced at the docket. "Custody hearing. Mother lost her job. Father claims she's unstable because of anxiety and medication." Eleanor tilted her head. "Sound familiar?" I nodded. "Too familiar," she smiled. "Then you already know what kind of compassion this courtroom needs. Just remember, listen to everyone, believe no one until you see evidence, and always put the child first." "What if I make the wrong decision?" I asked. "You will," she said. "We all do. But if your choices come from compassion and truth, they'll be the right kind of mistakes." Before leaving, she knelt beside Lily. "You take good care of your mom today, okay?" Lily grinned. "I always do." Minutes later, the bailiff called out, "All rise!" My heart hammered as I stepped into the courtroom. The sound of heels, papers, and murmurs faded when I sat at the bench. The King County Family Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Allison Turner presiding. Those words felt surreal, like I had stepped into a version of my life I'd once only dreamed of. The case was Sarah Jenkins versus Michael Jenkins. A mother fighting for her 5-year-old daughter, accused of instability because she'd lost her job and was on anxiety medication. The father sat smugly beside his attorney. The mother, fragile but determined, sat across from him, her hands trembling. As I listened to the arguments, I saw my reflection in her, the exhaustion, the quiet desperation to prove she was enough. "Miss Jenkins," I said gently, "how long have you been unemployed?" 2 months, Your Honor," she whispered. "The school where I taught cut staff. I'm applying everywhere." "And you're still providing care for your daughter?" "Yes, every day. She's my whole world." I turned to the father's attorney. "You claim instability. Any evidence of neglect, abuse, or endangerment?" He hesitated. "No, Your Honor, just financial hardship, and hardship isn't neglect," I interrupted. "And mental health treatment isn't a flaw." The father glared, but I didn't look away. I remembered what it felt like to be judged by people who only saw your lowest moment. I wouldn't let that happen here. When it was time for my ruling, I looked directly at both parents. This court doesn't deal in perfect people. It deals in truth, in effort, in love. Job loss doesn't make someone unfit. Seeking help doesn't make someone weak. The room was silent as I continued. "Primary custody is awarded to Miss Jenkins. Mr. Jenkins, you'll have visitation every other weekend. Both of you will participate in co-parenting counseling." Sarah Jenkins began to cry, the quiet kind of tears that come from relief so deep it hurts. She whispered, "Thank you for seeing me. I wanted to tell her that I saw her because I was her once." But judges don't tell stories from the bench. When the courtroom cleared, I sat there for a long time, letting it sink in. My first ruling, my first day, my first step toward making the system fairer than it had been to me. That night, after tucking Lily into bed, I made tea and opened my phone. There was a message from my mother. "Mom, started therapy last week. It's harder than I thought, but I'm trying. I'm proud of you, Allison." I didn't reply right away. Instead, I stared at the text. Simple, raw, real. It wasn't an apology. It was something better. Effort. Weeks passed. My days filled with hearings and paperwork, evenings with bedtime stories and grilled cheese dinners. Life finally felt steady. Then one afternoon, I received a call. "Allison?" My mother's voice was fragile. "My therapist says I need to take accountability for the things I did. I want to tell you the truth." I sat down, unsure what to expect. "When you were 8, she said, you won that spelling bee. I told you that second place would have been better because the winner gets too much attention." I thought I was teaching humility, but really, I was jealous. I felt something ache in my chest. when you graduated law school. I said I had a migraine, but the truth was, I couldn't stand watching you accomplish what I never did. And when Derek cheated, I told you it must have been your fault. Because it was easier than admitting men can just be cruel. Her voice cracked. I hurt you, Allison. Not out of hate, but out of envy and fear. You became everything I wasn't brave enough to be. I wiped my eyes. Why are you telling me this now? Because I finally see it. I spent your whole life trying to prove you weren't enough when the truth was, you were more than I could handle. I'm so sorry. Silence stretched between us, heavy but honest. I need time, Mom, I said. You tried to take my child. That wound doesn't heal overnight. I understand, she whispered. I'll wait. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better, for you and for Lily. 6 months later, I stood in the same courtroom where everything had fallen apart, but this time I was at the podium, not the defense table. Judge Morrison had invited me to speak at a family law conference. The audience was full of lawyers, judges, and advocates, people who made decisions like the one that once nearly broke me. I was fired from my first legal job, I began. I was diagnosed with postpartum depression. I waited tables to survive. And my own mother sued me for custody of my daughter. The room went silent. I'm telling you this because every person who comes before us is fighting a battle we can't see. They don't need judgment. They need understanding. I talked about how justice without empathy isn't justice at all. About how struggling doesn't mean failing. When I finished, the applause was long and real. Afterward, I saw her, my mother, sitting quietly in the back row. Her eyes were wet but proud. She approached me slowly. That was beautiful, she said softly. Could I take Lily to the park this weekend? With the supervisor, of course? I studied her face. The sharp edges were softer now. Okay, I said. But Mom, if you ever try to manipulate this again, I won't, she said quickly. I promise. I'm not that person anymore. Saturday came with sunshine. My mother brought a bright blue kite, and Lily laughed as it soared across the sky. I sat on a park bench watching them, my daughter, my mother, and the fragile thread of forgiveness fluttering between them. When they returned, my mother's eyes were red but peaceful. She's amazing, she said. You've done such a beautiful job raising her. I can't get those years back with you, but maybe I can be better for her. Maybe we both can, I said. That night, after Lily was asleep, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in months. Strength isn't about never falling. It's about standing up when everyone expects you to stay down. Our worst moments don't define us. How we rise from them does. I looked at the photo on my desk. Me, Lily, and my mother, taken just last week. 3 women. 3 generations. 3 chances to get it right. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus King. You're changing the system from the inside. Keep going. Another from Eleanor. Proud of you, Judge Turner. And one last one from my mother. Thank you for letting me try. I love you. I typed back slowly. I love you too, Mom. See you next Saturday. I put the phone down, turned off the lamp, and walked to Lily's room. Mommy, she mumbled half asleep. Are you still my superhero? I smiled and brushed her hair back. Always. Even when you're just my mom. Especially then. She smiled, eyes closing again. Maybe she was right. Maybe being a mother, showing up through fear, through heartbreak, through judgment, was its own kind of heroism. Not the kind with capes or applause, but the kind that quietly saves lives. And as I stood there watching my daughter sleep, I realized something. They said I could barely hold a job. They said I was unstable. They said I wasn't enough. They were wrong. I wasn't just enough. I was everything Lily needed, and for the first time in my life, that was enough for me too.